Hi, it's me Tom, finally back with another video. Today we are in my improvised studio, I guess. This is just so I don't have to set up my camera and my lights and everything in my living room and then disassemble everything and then get unmotivated to do another video. So yeah, I hope this will help with that and I can do videos quicker and more effectively. And yeah, that's what I want to do today. Today I want to talk about my trusty Lumix S5 camera, which is still my main camera and why I still think it's one of the best cameras you can get even in 2025. This is what I want to talk about in this video. I know I did a review a while ago talking about this camera, which got me a few views and some subscribers, and so I'm still quite sure that a lot of people are interested in content about this camera, and it really feels like this camera is being talked about more than ever, actually, which is really interesting. I know back when it came out, it got really overshadowed by other camera companies. Sony is probably the main one, which really took all the hype from this camera. So the A7S3, the FX3, which are still also to this day fantastic cameras, but they are a lot more expensive. And that's why I want to talk about this camera again. I know I talked about in detail about a lot of stuff in my review, which you can check out. I will link it right now here somewhere. But in this video, I really want to get into some of the details now that I used it for a couple of years and really know all the ins and outs. And I also want to talk about my setup and what I really love about this camera, what I don't like, not in a kind of reviewy way, because I already did that in my last video about this camera, but I really want to just talk about my journey with it, like how it made me grow as a filmmaker and why I still think this is a fantastic option even in late 2025. So let's talk about it. So as I said, this is my main camera still and it's been through a lot. It fell down a couple of times. There was a lot of rain it had to take, a lot of sand that got between the lens and stuff like that, which was really nerve-wracking. But still, this camera still works perfectly, still does everything it did on day one, and I bought it used back then for around €1,000. And that's also the first thing I still want to mention. It's really interesting how this camera is still really affordable, of course, but the price hasn't really gone down that much more. It's still around 1,000 if you want it in a good new condition. And yeah, you can get it cheaper than that, used, but it's interesting how things haven't really gone really that much cheaper, even though it's been a couple of years. And that's obviously also because of the economics right now. Things are going a bit differently than usual. Lots of things are getting more expensive, and that's also one of the first reasons I want to mention why this is still a great option. For what it offers, there's really nothing that beats it in my opinion. So let's take a quick look at my setup. As you can see, here's my camera with the 24-105 zoom lens, which is still my main lens, which just works with everything. You can really use this lens for every shoot if you want to. It doesn't have the most exciting characteristics or image quality, but it's just so versatile, and I just slap on a filter. You know, my channel name is still Filter Boy. I really need to change that, but yeah, I have a lot of filters, so this is a way to make boring lenses a bit more interesting. And if I don't know what I have to use or if I need to improvise, this is always the lens I will choose. You can go wide, you can go really long, and yeah, it basically covers everything. And that's why it's still my main lens for the usual run and gun project. And for movie stuff, I have different lenses now, which I already talked about and might do another video again. I'm of course talking about the Blazer lenses. I bought those a while ago, and also I have some thoughts on those, which I will be getting into in another video, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, these are basically the lenses I use the most if I want to shoot something more narrative driven, then yeah, something like the anamorphics from Blazer are a good option. In this case, I'm using an adapter, of course. It's this one from DZO Film. You can use any adapter that usually works. There are lots of other options, so I'm not gonna get much into that. As you can see, I use a cage, still the same cage, still the same handle. Now I also have a side handle, which just gives me more stability, and combined with the great stability from the lens and the in-camera body stabilization, which is still one of the best, even though it was their first iteration with a full-frame camera, but still works great. Now I also have a monitor mounted on top. I will tell you exactly what it's called. I think it's the OC T5 Plus. The Plus is important because this is the one that gets a lot brighter. And yeah, this is basically a great lightweight monitor, so it doesn't really add much weight. And yeah, you can just put on the NPF batteries or use it with a power bank, which is also great. So I usually have a power bank on there or have it on my body somewhere, so it doesn't really take more weight on the actual camera. But I can mount so much stuff with this setup on my camera. I also, right now, what I'm filming myself with and recording the audio with is a DJI mic. I have the receiver on the cage. You can just clip it on. It stays perfectly on there, and yeah, the mic is on my shirt, as you can see. And yeah, this is basically my setup for interviews, for narrative stuff, and it just works great. You can, in theory, upgrade it even more to a more professional cinema camera. If you want XLR and stuff like that, there's a XLR audio input you can put on the hot shoe, and then you have XLR inputs, which is fantastic. It's a bit pricey, maybe you can get it used somewhere, and it adds to the bulk, which I don't really like with those cameras, because it adds the bulk on top and not to the side or behind it. And that's one of the downsides with using a camera like this. You have to basically Frankenstein everything, and that's also what I want to get into with this camera. As I said, it really helped me like explore different territories, because this camera offers so much. And when you think about when it came out, it really was class leading with some of the options, like the anamorphic de-squeezing, for example, which no other camera manufacturer offered. And still Sony just now is slowly updating some of their hybrid cameras and SLRs to like offer some of the features this camera from like 2020 or 2019 offers. So that's really crazy. And yeah, this is really what I love about this camera. You can start with a simple Lumix lens like the 24-105 or even the cheaper one, or a third-party one from Sigma or something like that. And yeah, if you want to explore different options, if you want to go more narrative and you put on the XLR hot shoe adapter, or you want to use anamorphic lenses, which are now getting more and more affordable, which I've talked about in my Blazer lens review. And now it's really a great time to explore lots of different lenses and yeah, just different styles of filmmaking. And this camera really lets you just explore all those territories, which a lot of other cameras really don't do. I mean, now I have a monitor that also de-squeezes, so that problem is kind of solved anyway. But it's just interesting to think about what this camera did back then and what it still offers even in 2025, which is still a fantastic option. So why haven't I upgraded to like a newer Lumix camera like the S5 IIX or the S1 II or cameras like that? First of all, I want to mention this is not my main job. So videography or YouTube, stuff like that, this is not how I make my main money. So it's definitely more than a hobby, but again, I'm not making my main income from videography or filmmaking. So this is more like a side hustle to, yeah, do stuff like this, buy new stuff, and yeah, fund my narrative projects, which nobody cares about. So this is the first thing I want to say. And I mentioned this in my S5 review, and I want to mention it again. I really don't see a reason to upgrade at this point. yes, the new cameras offer some great new features. One of the main features, for example, which I would be interested in would be open gate, which, as you know, is more and more in demand, not just because of anamorphic filmmaking, but also because shooting in different formats, delivering in different formats for like Instagram, TikTok, and yeah, you basically have to do everything all at once these days. So having all the vertical and the horizontal height of the sensor all in one file is really helpful for that. So yeah, that would be nice to have. And other stuff like the autofocus, of course, which is one of the main things on this camera, which isn't really great, but I think for stuff like this, it should be able to work. And I haven't had huge problems with that. And again, I use anamorphic lenses like the Blazers, and with those, I don't have autofocus anyway. But still, some of these things would be nice to have, but in the end, it doesn't really matter when all the other stuff has even gotten a bit worse. And I haven't tested like the new S1 II. I used the S5 II at one point, and I've seen some of the reviews and people are talking about it more and more these days. In the beginning, nobody really mentioned it, but now people are talking about it more and more. And I also mentioned this in my review. The image quality has not really improved, and in some ways it has been degraded. And that has maybe something to do with the new face detection autofocus that's on there. And it uses a different algorithm to sharpen the image to, I don't know, see faces or the eyes of the person you're filming better. I don't really know the explanation. The fact is, however, even the new S1 II and the S1R2, or yeah, you know which cameras I mean, they all over sharpen the image a bit, which this camera doesn't do. And yeah, that's something to think about. Where I'm at right now, I'm really not in need of a new camera that, as I said again, offers worse image quality in some instances, and yeah, it doesn't really offer an upgrade in the areas that I really care about. So this is the main reason why I still haven't upgraded. And of course, yeah, paying like double or triple the price for a camera that, yeah, is worse in some categories than an ancient camera like the S5 you can get for a fraction of the price. It really is mind-blowing how well this camera holds up. So yeah, this is the main reason why I'm not upgrading still and really don't see a need. But again, if I were like a professional videographer who makes his main income with videography, then of course considering some of these upgrades is understandable. So I'm not saying like everybody who buys the new Lumix cameras is an idiot. These cameras are still fantastic and offer fantastic upgrades and are class leading in a lot of areas. But just for me, it doesn't really make sense. So what would be the ideal camera to upgrade to for me? And it doesn't have to be a Lumix camera, but I would like it to be a Lumix camera. But there really isn't one out there for me right now. So let me explain. I'm a bit over, or I'm just done with the SLR hybrid type camera that really is starting to annoy me a bit. Let me explain why. I really only do video stuff, so I don't really need all the stills features on my S5 or like a new Lumix camera, for example. They are all hybrids, and it really doesn't make sense for me to always buy or pay for features, for 50% of the features that I'll basically never use. And I'm also not a fan of like the form factor of these cameras, because I showed you my setup and I'm fine with it. It works great, but in the end, it always feels like you are Frankensteining. I don't know if that's a word. It's probably not a word, but you're always like assembling something that isn't really what it's supposed to be. It's kind of like trying to create a cinema camera out of something that isn't a cinema camera. And that's what I feel like when I look at my rig. And as I said, it works great. I'm happy with it. But just the form factor alone of like a camera that goes wide and not like the typical like camcorder style or video camera style box camera that's just more going long and not wide, which to me is really annoying because you're always building on top of it. As you can see, the monitor is really high up and I wish it were on the side, but the side monitor on this camera is tiny, and yeah, putting it on the side, maybe it's possible in some way, but it's not gonna work great and it's not gonna look good and it's not gonna really work on a camera like this. And yeah, I'm really hoping for a new camera from Lumix that is kind of like the EVA1 or EVA1, I don't know really what it was called. And that camera really piqued my interest when it came out, but that was a long time ago. And that camera, yeah, got overshadowed even more than the Lumix S5 when it came out. So that camera was basically a fail, I think, for them because yeah, they never attempted something like this again. It's also interesting how Lumix basically like started from a high bracket and got down to the lower tiers like in reverse. I know people maybe remember the Vericam, which was like a top contender cinema camera with like the big shots like Arri. And yeah, then later they tried to go into those lower tiers and compete with cameras like, I think back then it was the FS5, FS7, which dominated the market completely. It's really remarkable what Sony has done in like the last 10 years or something, how far they've gotten with some of their cameras. It's really impressive. You gotta hand it to them. And yeah, Lumix tried to offer something like the EVA, but it was maybe a bit too late. And again, they didn't have the autofocus. It had an EF mount, I think, and that's also a reason why I'm not really interested in this camera right now, because you can get the EVA1 also really cheap right now and in decent condition. But yeah, I don't really want to deal with another mount, and yeah, that's why I'm really yearning for a camera from Lumix that's a camcorder, a video camera, a cinema camera first, and not a hybrid like the S1 II, which we all know now doesn't just have problems with the image, it also has problems with overheating, which yeah, is something that never happened to Lumix before. And yeah, that's really something concerning actually. So I really want Lumix to go back to the drawing board and create something like an EVA Ultra, which would just be the EVA1, but with a full frame sensor and L mount, of course, because back then L mount had almost no lenses, and now there's a lot of options out there, and even like anamorphic lenses these days come with native L mount lenses. So yeah, they really have come a long way. So now really is the time to create something like an EVA Ultra. I'm just going to call it EVA Ultra. Maybe Lumix will take notes. But yeah, I think this would be the ultimate camera for Lumix to go back into those higher tiers in the right order, and yeah, offer something in those categories, because that's really where Sony got everyone. They had the FS5, they had the FS7, they had the FX6, they had the FX3, they have now the FX2. They really offer something for every single niche, and they don't always do it perfectly well, but they position themselves always at the right time. And you can think of Sony cameras what you want. They have problems with the image quality, they have problems with their menus and getting features or not getting features, but they really like outdid themselves. And now the FX3 is still one of the most used cameras, most bought cameras out there, and it still has a hefty price tag, which a lot of people are willing to pay because it's an awesome camera. And if you want to upgrade, you have those video cameras out there for you, waiting for you, like the FX6, which will soon get an upgrade as well, I think. You had the FX9, which is discontinued, I think. And of course, you have now the Venice 2, which also made a big impact in those movie production tiers. And yeah, it's really, really impressive. And Lumix really has to, in my opinion, also go back into that market. So I don't have to deal with this camera anymore, which I love. I love my S5 and I will never sell it, but maybe I will sell it one day. But I really want something like the EVA, something like the EVA, with internal NDs, with a proper video focused body and with L mount. So get on it, Lumix, please. Now, of course, there are some other camera manufacturers which offer basically almost exactly what I talked about, and that's Blackmagic with the Pixis cameras, but those cameras have their own problems which I don't really want to deal with. Again, I'm going to mention this again. I would not consider myself an absolute professional. I mean, I know what I'm doing. Yes, I'm going to say that right into the camera. I know how filmmaking works and I did some decent stuff. But with Blackmagic, first of all, the Pixis doesn't have internal NDs. I'm sure there will be one coming out which will have those features. But what I also don't want to deal with is B-RAW. And I know it's a fantastic RAW codec, and I know with DaVinci and all that stuff, it's you basically buying yourself into a fantastic ecosystem to create effortlessly perfect looking cinematic images. But I don't want to deal with those file sizes. I really don't want to. And I thought about actually buying the Pixis because for the price, and now it got even lower in price, which is absolutely mind-blowing because it didn't came out that long ago. And again, we are living in really weird times with tariffs and other economic issues. And yeah, this camera is a fantastic deal, but B-RAW, even like 12:1 ratio is so much storage to deal with. And yeah, for someone who isn't like living off of videography and has like 1 billion terabytes of storage just ready to use, I don't want to deal with it. I don't. And yeah, that's the main reason why I'm not going over to Blackmagic. And that's also like a huge reason why I love the S5. You can shoot on like the cheapest of the cheapest SD cards and still film in 4K 10-bit without any problems. And that's what I love about this camera also. This is what I want to say maybe in the end. It really offers so much for so little money, and even the accessories, even the storage you have to buy for this camera is dirt cheap. And that's why it's still, for me, the best option. I hope this will soon be different. I know there's a lot of cameras coming out. Canon just came out with an FX3 clone, basically. I mean, it's not a clone, but you know where they took their inspiration. And yeah, I really hope Lumix will maybe take inspiration from Sony with like the FX line, with like the FX6, and maybe do a proper video camera. And I'm probably the only one who isn't hyped for a new SH1 II or something like that, because it's just gonna be like a hybrid camera with a massive wide body, which I don't want to deal with. And yeah, give me an SH1 with internal NDs and a proper camcorder style, video camera style body. That's all I want. So this is my final video on the S5, or yeah, maybe not my final video, but my final verdict. I love this camera. It made me grow as a filmmaker. It made me a lot of money. It made its money back 10 times. And yeah, I love this camera, and I even made a video about it in 2025. So please, if you watched this far, give me a like, write a comment, let me know what you think about this video. Let me know what do you think about this improvised studio? I mean, it's not a studio, but I make it look like one, hopefully one day. So yeah, leave a like, please subscribe to the channel. I will not let this channel die. And I don't know if you can tell, but it's really late and I really have to go to bed and I'm exhausted. Making videos is hard. Yeah, I'm rambling. Goodbye.